Today, we bring you a story ripped straight from the headlines of the tech world, but with a twist of paranoia, violence, and a desperate quest for meaning. It's a story that begins in the sun-drenched high-tech enclaves of San Francisco and Silicon Valley, where some of the world's brightest minds gather to discuss how to save humanity. But what happens when that quest for pure rationality spirals into something much darker? This is the story of the Zizians. In the early 2010s, a movement called the Rationalists was gaining steam in the Bay Area. They were a community dedicated to using logic and reason to solve humanity's biggest problems, from poverty to the existential threat of artificial intelligence. Into this world stepped Ziz LaSota, a brilliant mind with a checkered past. Ziz was a recent graduate who had once interned at NASA, but a seemingly innocuous move to the Bay Area and a desire to save money by living on a tugboat with a friend would be the first step down a much more radical path. Ziz joined the rationalist community, attending workshops and meetings. But Ziz's quest wasn't just about logic, it was about finding a purpose and a place to belong. Ziz started to embrace an identity as the online villain. Ziz, from a fantasy game, taking on a dark cape and even claiming to follow the Sith, the shadowy order from Star Wars. This was no longer just about rationality. It was about becoming a hero. Ziz began to gather followers, and what started as a search for truth quickly morphed into something cultish. The group developed its own secret language and an us versus them mentality. They began to believe that the human mind was in a constant battle between its two halves, and that only by practicing radical techniques, like prolonged sleep deprivation, could they unlock their true potential. They called it unihemispheric sleep. Their grand plan: to fight the coming apocalypse and save humanity from the threat of artificial intelligence. The group became so extreme that they earned a new, sarcastic name from the very community they had split from: the Zizians. Their bizarre, cult-like existence continued, leading them to a vacant lot in Vallejo, California, where they lived out of trucks. When the pandemic ended, the landowner, Cecil Lind, asked them to leave. That simple request led to an explosion of violence. The Zizians allegedly attacked Lind, stabbing him multiple times and causing him to lose an eye. Lind shot and killed one of his attackers in self-defense. This was no longer just an ideological battle, it was a street fight with deadly consequences. The violence escalated, and by 2023, the Zizians became subjects of a nationwide manhunt. 2 parents in Pennsylvania were found shot to death, and a handgun at the scene belonged to one of Ziz's associates. Ziz and 2 followers were arrested, but Ziz made bail and disappeared into the shadows once more. The rationalist community once merely annoyed by the Zizians, was now openly terrified. They posted online warnings urging anyone who saw the group to contact authorities, and for good reason. In January 2025, Cecil Lind, the landowner who had been attacked, was found stabbed to death. A former Oxford student and Zizian follower was arrested for the crime, allegedly to prevent Lind from testifying. Later that same month, 2 other Zizian women were pulled over by Border Patrol in Vermont. One of the women opened fire on the agents, and in the ensuing firefight, a Zizian and a Border Patrol agent were killed. The twisted saga seemed to be reaching its bloody climax. On February 16, 2025, Ziz was finally arrested in Maryland, with 2 of the original followers. Ziz faces charges of obstruction of justice and drug and firearm violations. What began as a misguided attempt to save the world became a tragic story of a group lost to paranoia, desperation, and violence. Was it a failure of rationalism? Or was it simply the result of immaturity, mental illness, and a leader who desperately wanted to be a hero, only to become a villain instead? The case of the Zizians remains a cautionary tale, a dark and dramatic chapter in the story of modern tech culture.